Hello, this is Crack J Glasses, and I'm going to be reading an article from the Catholic World Report today. I've been going online looking at different religious articles, and this one kind of struck me. Just like I hope that guy in the motorcycle strikes a sign later. So annoying. Anyways, so the Catholic World Report. This article is called Secularism's Moonshot Doctrine of Resurrection. Secularism is nothing more than an attempt to remake Christianity's understanding about man, God, and the world. By James Day. He's a frequent contributor to Catholic things, and he's apparently wrote a book on Pope Benedict. So, he's a expert in something, so good for him, I guess. But, so, as you can see, this article is already attacking secularism pretty hard, and when you find out what the whole thing is about, you're gonna kinda... I hope anybody listening will be like, that is kinda weird, because it is. Okay. Time magazine's cover story, Can Google Solve Death, was published on the last day of September 2013 and was written by Harry McCracken and Lev Grossman. The subtitle, The Search Giant is launching a venture to extend the human lifespan that would be crazy if it weren't Google. Evokes an insight Ken Auletta noted in his 2009 Googled The End of the World as We Know It, quoting an unnamed CEO of one media conglomerate. The brilliance of Google's business is that the consumers love them. Consumers never loved Microsoft. Yeah, with the latest updates, it's hard to imagine why. And name a business that Google is not going to disrupt. Google's quest to solve death is the business to be disrupted, and because its beloved Google is not only a welcome pursuit, but also one that might actually be solved, a lifespan without end. Now, where I kinda have a few problems with the idea of living forever, but it's an interesting concept, and there's a lot of philosophical questions you can raise, and ethical ones, and this article will continue to, look into it as we go on further. To eradicate death and harvest an earthly version of the resurrection of the body and life as everlasting is secularism's ultimate redefinition of Christian ethos. No, it's not. It has very, very little to do with that, especially the whole resurrection part. Why would Silicon Valley orient its energies on it? Yet if Time, never a publication that makes out on putting its stamp on popular trends, see its declaration of Pope Francis's Person of the Year in 2013, is touting such a quest from the likes of Google, then secularism's aim to foster human-driven resurrection is less fringe theory than a probability. Yeah, I don't think this has anything to do with Christian ethos. Maybe I'm missing the idea here, and it sure as hell isn't about resurrection. Extending the lifespan literally is not resurrection. And it's not secularism's, it's, goals of science. It isn't some secular culture forcing this idea down your throat. That's all I'm saying. Alright. Next. The timepiece centered on the launch of the Google company Calico, the slogan which, "We're tackling aging, one of life's greatest mysteries," suggests Google's great, fascinating contradiction. Its ability to be both transparent and cagey at the same time. Indeed, how did a mere search engine competing in the late 1990s with Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista emerge to the globe, Google Maps, copy its books, Google Books, and invent driverless cars, formerly Google X, now just X, as well as possess the knowledge of what is being searched for all around the world and by whom? Its omnipotence has not been lost on the Obama administration, which, according to a 2015 Wall Street Journal report, has met with Google's executives more than 230 times. Yeah, that sucks. I really don't like that that people are going through our searches, but I also can't really do anything about it, and I don't know what it has to do with the idea of expanding life. I think he's just attempting to paint Google in the light of some sort of faceless conglomerate that's going to, kill us all or something. Which, honestly, yeah, it's a large corporation and can be kind of scary, so, it's not off base that way, I guess. Meanwhile, and not coincidentally, the field of biotechnology has exploded in both research, funding, and profits. The job site AngelList, I've never even heard of that, reports 2,940 startups in relation to biotechnology, while the ostensible purpose, according to the institutions and foundations involved in the work, is to extend healthy lives and defeat enemies such as cancer. Apprehension simmers, slowly coming to the fore. What were once ideas regulated to sci-fi shelves, genetic modification or radical life extension, for instance, are now serious subjects of conquest, pioneered by the high-profile executives of the most influential tech firms, who have already won people over with multimedia triumphs that have forever reshaped the cultural landscape. Okay, so are you attempting to paint the biotechnology boom in a bad light because according to what it says, it wants to extend healthy lives and defeat enemies such as cancer? No shit, a biotechnological company wants to do that. That's kind of the point of it, is to, extend life and prevent disease. Why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't any... so confusing. Your scientists were so preoccupied whether or not didn't stop to think if they should. This is the observation from Dr. Ian Malcolm, Michael Crichton's character in Jurassic Park. And, quoting Jurassic Park, alright. Already seems archaic 25 years later, the Atlantic's 2012 interview with game designer and professor Bennett Foddy, radical life extension is already here, but we're doing it wrong. That's actually kind of a funny title. As some ethicists have pointed out, the death is one of the major forces for equality in the world, and that welfare disparities will be worsened if some people can afford to postpone old age, or avoid it altogether, while others are unable to. Okay, yeah, that sucks. That is actually a good argument that we should have. I like that argument. What do you say to them? Fuddy agrees with the line of questioning that is unfair, saying it is unfair that a certain part of the world has a longer life expectancy than others. It's not a good that benefits you only if other people are worse off. It is perhaps a more perceptive question than intended, beyond the somewhat socialist notion that everyone must live to be a certain age in order to enforce equality. It raises another idea. Is the ambition to reverse anti-aging meant for everyone? Will living to 150 actually be in the best interest of the planet's billions? And once the arbitrary 150 becomes indefinite, what are the economic and social implications of who will pay the price? See right here, this is solid. I like this right here. Because who would be able to afford it? Who would benefit? This would be a very, very good argument against it, to at least the indefinite part. And I'm sure that if you just made it to 150 and then you were killed, that'd also be an ethical problem. So, yeah, this is good. I like this. Except the Jurassic Park quote, which is kind of just, peppering. If you assume your audience won't listen to you unless you quote popular culture, then you're probably doing it wrong. And what do you mean, somewhat socialist? That is definitely a socialist notion, but let's move on. Who is to be saved? These are the questions of the new societal religion. Okay, how did we go from that to a new societal religion? That wouldn't be a religion, that would be just now would be the state we are living in. It isn't a belief system. It would just, we had created the problem, the issue, and we would develop things to work with it. That wouldn't make it a religion, that would just make it government, not religion. Whether conscious or not, the Silicon Valley giants, the self-proclaimed innovators seeking to cheat death, are the same in time carving out doctrines of new faith. No, they're not. What? That isn't a new faith. It is asking the question. It isn't a new faith, and if you're anti them doing it, that's still not a religious angle. I'm sure that you could corrupt it into some type of religion, but by itself it is not a religious thing. They cannot ignore the obvious. How to deal with God. Yes, they can, because in this, God isn't a thing. They can ignore it very easily. What is incontrovertible is that a religious impulse guides our motive in sustaining that scientific inquiry. If not, what else? A microbiologist named Dr. Joshua Litterberg once wrote. How about just regular, curiosity? I am pretty sure that I am not motivated by anything that I don't want to do when it comes to what I want to learn. I learn what interests me, and nothing leads me there. Okay? That is kind of insulting to free will and science. So, according to this guy, because God guides science, the way they're doing it will make God having new rules, a new faith, and a new religion? Is that the idea? Because that's really dumb. To God alone pertains the judgment of death of life. And said St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologiae, whether or not one believes this, the biotech titans know they must seemingly address in their own way before their moonshot vision is realized. While Google may be the most recognizable Silicon Valley entity jumping onto the life extension arena, it is not alone. Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison is there too. Death has never made any sense to me. Well, that's a bit narcissistic. Or maybe he just simply doesn't think that. Thinks it doesn't. Okay. Ellison once lamented to biographer Mike Wilson, the author of The Difference Between God and Larry Ellison. How can a person be there and then just vanish, just not be there? Driven by this question, Ellison looked to the best and formed a decisive union between tech and biology, developing a relationship with the 1958 winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, who was recognized for adequate discoveries concerning genetic recombination and the organization of genetic material of bacteria at the time. The recipient was 33 years old. He was the above quoted Joshua Lederberg, who died in 2008 of age 82 of pneumonia. Okay. So he was a religious scientist. That's alright. And he disagreed with the person who was employing him to extend life. It doesn't really say, at least not in this paragraph, that he didn't try, because, I mean, well, if he was contradicting who didn't try, that'd be kind of fucked up. So, yeah. Lederberg was the catalyst for the creation of Ellison's nonprofit corporation, the Lawrence Ellison Foundation, formerly the Ellison Medical Foundation. Initially meeting after Lederberg delivered a speech at Stanford in the early 1990s that Ellison happened to hear. The two bonded over the topic of aging. Eventually, Lederberg was tapped as the chair of the Foundation's Scientific Advisory Board in 1997 and remained on the board until his death. Geneticist accomplishments span the decades, the Nobel Prize, and other accolades that followed only capstones to a brilliant career. In a 1966 journal article, Experimental Genetics and Human Evolution, Lederberg flatly observes the context of modern man includes steadily increasing reliance on medicine, i.e. eugenics, from ovulation onwards. He preferred the term eugenics, which Lederberg himself invented, over this similar word eugenics. Oh yeah, let's start with the Nazi comparisons with working with genetics. We're attempting to breed supermen kind of thing. Honestly, that is a good ethical argument that you could end up there, but that also isn't what the Nazis were really trying to do, because they already had an idea of what the perfect being would be like, and that immortality really wasn't a part of it. And yes, we are definitely becoming more reliant on medicine as it makes us live longer because people don't want to die. That is incredibly logical. So, Lederberg was at the forefront of computer science and artificial intelligence, which supported his genetics work, a foresight indicative of his ability to merge his research with public policy. With one eye the present and another of the future, he became a sought-after figure in the Department of Defense, NASA, the World Health Organization, and the CDC. Yes, that's good things. I mean, he was that good, apparently. Was a scientific advisor to 9 U.S. presidents, and he was president of Rockefeller University, as well as a longtime professor at Stanford. He was an advisor on President-elect Kennedy's transition team in 1961, which received the Medal of Freedom from President Bush in 2006, writing for the Washington Post in 1969. Lederberg positive molecular biology will have far more impact on human affairs via abstract philosophy than as any engineering technology. That an ordering of philosophy was central to Lederberg. He knew that both engineering technology would rapidly develop, and yet without an underlying set of ideas to guide it, it would never gain traction beyond the lab. Science has a long way to go in completing its account of history of the universe and the origin of life, and I see no point in pitting that process against anyone labeled religious. Yeah, well, I would think that molecular biology, working with ourselves and what makes us, would definitely have more philosophical connotations than engineering technology. I mean, that's part of what it... I mean, whenever you're working with material that's conscious, it has more to do with that, unless you're going to look at the artificial intelligence, and then you have to ask what consciousness is and what sentience is, and that is deep-ass shit. I'm not seeing... It says he knew that, you would need to, have an underlying set of ideas. I don't see how that means it's God. A set of, creating a set of self-governing ideas to try and make sure you don't do anything too detrimental to the world is kind of basic. And doesn't really work very well, actually. We do a lot of fucked up shit as humanity. So, yeah. And I don't see a point in pitting that against someone labeled a religious, but for very, very different reasons, because most of the time they kind of plug their ears and go la 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 la. So, in the same 1969 Washington Post article entitled Science has long known ways to make subhumans. Okay. Lederberg cites the debate on how advances in science would affect the social order. Life extension concern, Lederberg, not so much as an ethical question, but in terms of biology. What could be a more drastic effect on human biology overall than adding another decade or two to its old age to the average life? Today, especially with a population over 7 billion, as the attractive idea of life extension is, beyond the obvious logistic issues such as economic and renewable resources, something deeper is at play. Survival of the fittest. This is the philosophy of transhumanism. This is the ideology of the New Age, of the elites eagerly seeking to reboot the Arthurian quest for the promises of the Holy Grail, not as a Christian relic, but as the source of immortality. Actually, I would liken it more to the Philosopher's Stone, which was a combination of beliefs and chemistry to try and create something that not only made an infinite amount of gold, but also gave you eternal life. It's a lot. I suppose because this is a religious writer, he'd rather use the Holy Grail, because maybe that'll strike something with his readers more. And, philosophy of transhumanism, and of the elites eagerly waking to seeking. Yes, transhumanism is an ideology, and by its definition of the New Age, because it is ever increasing into the future. And there is a lot of logistical issues with living forever. There is. Yes, that would be a very good argument against it. That it is very fucking complicated. So. And this is Lederberg's words, not his, so far. About how, there's logical problems with that. So. Just not for all, Lederberg on such a social adjustment, we are on the shakiest ground trying to sort out all the genetic basis of social disease as crime and delinquency continues, instability of family life, the estrangements of generations, and the shallowness of the human communication are more prevalent and cumulatively more serious than disease than violent crime, and must be given equal account and effort to define the good man, or in any lament of human deterioration, who will cast the first stone. Yeah, that would more than likely, if you eliminate it, if you're trying to extend life, the behavior of said people would end up becoming more important than actually maintaining it. And then defining who is good would also be completely upended. So, Yeah, that would be incredibly hard to do. And in the first full year of closing the Vatican's Second Council, 2 years before the Humanae Vitae confirmed the Church's position on human reproduction. Okay. Yeah. The Promethean prospect of eternal regeneration awaits us, boasted the New England Journal of Medicine in 2003. As the likes of the Lederberg-inspired Silicon Valley-funded corporations push into new realms of what would formerly be considered ethical gray areas, public support remains positive. Google solves death, beloved brand confronts dread, with some longer-term moonshot thinking around healthcare and biotechnology. I believe we can improve millions of lives. As read Google's Larry Page statement in the press announcing Calico as Calico's CEO, is Apple's chairman Arthur Levinson. Apple's CEO Tim Cook also chimed in, for too many of our friends and family, life has been cut short, or the quality of their life is too often lacking. So yeah, I get Prometheus, stealing fire, yeah, you got that whole thing there where he was then punished by the gods for all eternity. And corporations will always continue to push into what was considered ethically gray areas. Science will always do that. It is impossible for it not to. Because progress demands that you push the more and more uncomfortable things all the time. Forever and ever. At least, well, until we all die. But and we'll probably kill ourselves. So I get where you're going, but I mean, ethical gray areas. Of course it's an ethical gray area. Why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't science go into those? Because if you don't know if it's possible, then it doesn't matter if it's ethically gray or not. Because then, no matter what you decide about it, it doesn't matter. So, fuck it. It's hard to deny the emotivism conveyed by the heads of two of the planet's most influential companies, the desire to halt mortal issues. Yes. Yes, there is an emotional component to not wanting to die and to, extend everybody's life. That is, people feel things about it. This is true. Yet, it is precisely emotivism that stumps for the support of advancing biotechnology, leaving little room for concepts such as redemptive suffering and penance. Yes! That's because it doesn't exist in this idea. Penance doesn't need to happen if you extend life inevitably. This is true. And redemptive suffering, well, if the whole idea is to alleviate as much suffering as possible, then yeah, we should probably, not suffer. And let alone God's grace. Yeah, God is not part of this equation. It is, when we're talking theoretically extending life, until it actually happens, or we get that close, it really doesn't matter. So, when emotivism is allowed to influence arenas such as social justice system, or when the ecclesial temptation to misplace mercy as bona fide and cheap grace predominates, really where logic and truth prevail. And the emotivism molecular biology's power promises is the type of PR it needs in order for its manipulators to achieve their objective. Okay, you believe we are here to suffer so we can get into heaven. I understand this, but you need to understand, to people that don't believe that you would just be prolonging suffering for no reason. And cheap grace, who are you to define what people's grace is? Influencer, the justice system, of course it's going to. And sometimes, yeah, it doesn't get it quite right, but... And people try and be impartial, but yeah, emotion will always be key in developing what areas we go to and what choices we make as a society. And you're believing that we are being manipulated, all of our emotions are being manipulated to, go with their objective. You mean like how you manipulate fear so people will pray to a god so they don't go to hell? You mean like that? Or purgatory, and then indulgences? I mean, I'm just going with if we're going strictly on Catholicism on this. I mean, if we want to go even further, I mean, emotional manipulation of the masses is what everybody does all the time. You can't stop it. It will be there until the end of man. So, you just happen to be manipulated into one point of view, so the other points of view were incorrect. If you were at the center of looking at them all, I'm sure they'd all look asinine. So, I don't know. Maybe we should ask sociopaths to actually make our decisions, eh? They don't feel. How do you like that idea? That objective must first remove one of the bastions of defense that still defies it. We have a different standard. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger stated in his homily just prior to the 2005 Conclave, the Son of God, true man, he is the measure of true humanism. No? You can't really measure humanism and humanitarianism. At least I am of the belief you cannot measure these things. And the idea of suffering to die for everyone could lead to if everybody had that much humanity and humility, would probably lead us very nowhere. Because I feel like people could be easily guilted into doing things, albeit accidentally. And, we have a society of people that are serially in penance and not actually accomplishing things. So that would be terrible humanism, at least to me. Against the prowess of the heads of Google, Oracle, and Apple, equipped as they with the world's wealth, government collaboration, and unquestioning populace and the minds of the caliber of Joshua Lederberg, how does such a statement as Cardinal Ratzinger's even stand a chance? It doesn't. It doesn't, because it's kind of irrelevant to the idea of actually trying to implement these things. It's irrelevant to the science itself. It may be relevant to the social constructs we live in. In fact, it definitely is. But we can argue that all we want. Until it actually happens, it doesn't really mean anything. So, this is the great question of the day for the Catholic who recognizes his footing is at a crossroads, particularly in the final confrontation, and that Cardinal Wojtyla of Krakow pointed out in his American audience in 1976. We are now facing the confrontation between the church and the anti-church, the gospel versus the anti-gospel. Okay, this right here is, what is anti-church? Is anti-church just everything that disagrees with the church's views? Because that's pretty much everything. Science isn't the anti-church because science doesn't care about the church. It is irrelevant to the church. Science as a concept does not care. And it doesn't have an anti-gospel because it doesn't care about your gospel. It's not deliberately trying to fly in the face of whatever you're doing. It just simply doesn't care about it. And we're getting into some real, I was going to say revelations, but it almost sounds more like Left Behind shit with, the anti-gospel. It's like, do you consider, is there the gospel and then anything against the gospel is anti-gospel? I'm just not entirely sure what you're defining things as. Considering you're the one trying to define these things, you should be clearer. I see no evidence for this stuff, Larry Ellison once said about the particular dogmas of Judaism. I do not believe they are real. They're interesting stories, they're interesting mythology, and I can certainly respect people that believe these are literally true. And yet it cannot be lost on Ellison that science and technology are steeped in such stories by their own right. They are today's religion. No, they are not. Not even slightly. Stories of science. Yes, there are stories of scientists that I suppose you could look at in a mythological sense. But they are also provable and culpable of what they did. People will look back and change their judgments on people because they knew there were people of what they did and did not create. In a religious type of belief, you always believe you are right no matter how long it's been, or what society has turned into. I mean, we thought making the APOM was a good idea. Turned out, while it ended World War II, it kinda has created a lot of problems with nuclear armaments. Making, the infamous line, "I have become death," kind of a telling point in that, we don't look at that as favorably as we did. We don't look at a lot of technology and sciences as fondly. We change our opinion over time. Religion doesn't change its opinion over time. That is a very, very different part of it. Religious people change their, they cherry pick and they change how they, will practice certain things. But the actual belief does not change. Also, when something is theorized, it can always change. And even if it's written as a law, well, it's written as a law because we have proof of it to a degree which can be disproven if we find something. There is a pursuit to change the rules of this religion. If it was a religion, it would be a pursuit to change the rules of itself constantly. So, that doesn't really sound like a religion. It sounds more like an obsession or a drug addiction, actually, but it's not a religion. Although I suppose you could argue that drug addiction religion, because you're filling up your mind with happy thoughts. But I don't know. I do know some things, but this is just... I hate it when people try and turn science into a religion. It doesn't make sense. Transhumanism's quest for immortality can be put another way. Transhumanism seeks to manufacture the immortal into mortal, a twisted incarnation, archaic dogmas. The notion of God, the soul, and afterlife are being reinvented now. No, they're simply not being considered. You can't reinvent something that you're not thinking about. And it's trying not to manufacture the immortal into mortal. It's trying to turn mortal things into immortal things. You could argue that, but it has no want to actually there is no active thought to, well, we must destroy this. It's just trying to change things. It doesn't really matter what's in its way. It isn't an active destroy everything type thing. It's after our being reinvented now, the secular rebooting of religion, which makes no sense at all. Like, at all. You cannot secularly reboot religion. Those words together don't mean anything. With a catch. This is not a concern about life after death, but eternal life for the here and now. Yes, that is the issue you've been talking about. We know. Appeals directly to the scandal of particularity, as Carl E. Olson notes in his book, Did Jesus Really Rise from the Dead? He writes, those who believe that Christianity is too literal, too earthly minded, too rational, and too focused on Jesus' unique figure. Okay. The lure of immortality offered by the tech elites then proposes a much more appealing way toward a world without end. Too rational, too focused on Jesus' unique figure. Yes! If you believe that, you probably don't believe in God, so why would you really care? Then you wouldn't believe that you could be immortal afterwards anyway. Unless you're going to people that are deists, which they don't really, most of the time, don't believe the deity in question, has that active of a role, so. This is just turned into fucking science fiction. It's like if Joseph McCarthy fucking, believed that science fiction was always real that he read and then scare tacted. It's just so weird. But the question remains, who is saved in this new faith, this new immortality? The plan for salvation appears to include 4 stages. Okay, that is, yes, who would be giving these privileges? Not who is saved in this new faith, because it's not a faith. If it's proven that it can live at least longer than now, then it's not a faith. It's kind of proven that it makes you live longer than your natural lifespan would be. So, the plan for salvation appears to include 4 stages. The first 2 are progressing rapidly: depopulation and distraction. The prototypical example for population control is National Security Study Memorandum 200 and SSM 200. The then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger analyzing countries deemed problematic and of the concern of the United States national security because they're billing as overpopulated nations. The study's recommendation limiting these populations is a microcosm for the elitist requisite of a lowered population. So, basically, there's a concern of being overpopulated. Is a microcosm for the elitist requisite of a lowered population. So, in the 2000, I'm not entirely sure what that means, I'm going to be frank. I'll have to look it up later. In the 2015 Washington Post profile, The Human Upgrade, Tech Titans, the latest project Defy Death, Ariana N. Cha writes, life extension would radically change the most important building block for society in the family. No one seems to be able to predict what life might be like a half a dozen or more generations are alive simultaneously, but if one were to imagine a world with the result of lowered global birth rates far removed from the days of chaos and unrest in brimming metropolises, 6 or more generations living on private islands or coastal enclaves is far more predictable. Yes, that sounds about right. I mean, yeah, if nobody's dying, there'd probably be a lot of generations living in certain areas. In fact, it probably wouldn't be strange to have an entire country populated by what would be a singular family, similar to a tribe. So, of course, the Catholic Church has no place in this scheme because they aren't thinking or caring about you. It's not about you. Okay? With its emphasis on the family and the human person and the responsibility and freedom will each possess. Enter Dan Brown, whose 2013 literary concoction Inferno features not only the return of the Da Vinci Code hero Robert Langdon, but a transhumanist villain and his fixation on a world too populated for the transhumanist philosophy to materialize. Yes, that is actually a fairly common theme in media, the idea that we have too many people, so we need to eliminate some. And that, yeah, that's a bad thing, because, genocide's a terrible thing. Mass murder's a terrible thing. You don't need religion to tell you that. Targeting, once again, the Church's teachings in Humanae Vitae as a detrimental to stability. It joins other high-profile movies exploring transhumanist themes, such as Ridley Scott's ongoing Alien/Prometheus series. Okay. One, I like to forget Prometheus existed, but you also wanted something else Ridley Scott did? He did fucking Blade Runner, which is actually about humans subjugating the clearly superior replicants. And that there is we're giving them limited time simply because they are better than us. They feel, we prove that in the film, so yes, transhuman ideas exist, and if anything, it's proving that humans shouldn't, try and destroy what is clearly better than them, because it just makes us into fucking psychopaths. People actually hunt down living beings to prevent this. To prevent transhumanism, you hunt transhumanists, or what was once considered human. That is. So if anything, that's the extreme opposite of what you're looking at here. And in tandem with the surging interest in biotechnology, the lure of Silicon Valley, the popularity of its CEOs, and coverage from the mainstream media, the marketing campaign is on. When people orient their lives around devices developed by such technology firms, it's the public persona of these companies gains credence, further distancing one's understanding of the Church's breadth on the greater context of life and death. Just because they're not thinking about you doesn't mean they're not understanding, or they just simply disagree. So, a digital device seemingly has all the answers. The digital, the virtual, the cloud, these are the invisible new sensus supernalis, which brings us to the stage of distraction. Yes, I would agree that we probably distract ourselves too much. But not because of trying to distract us from religion specifically. We distract ourselves from our own problems because we can. It's a human thing. Ugh. We need to look no further than Joshua Lederberg from 50 years ago. Play rather than work will be the substrum of human activity, and the transmutation of play into cultural progress will replace the underpinning by industrial and military technology of its superstructure of basic science. For from adults, prolonging adolescence to preoccupations with unreality such as pornography. Distraction leads to indifference, insensitivity, and soullessness. Okay. You at least were making some sort of point, with his words, with the idea that, okay, yeah, if the longer we make the human lifespan, industrial, military technology really won't matter, and superstructures of basic science really won't be a thing, and we will continue to prolong what entertains us and keep ourselves entertained. That would be a good argument not to extend your life, because you will be bored. I believe it was Kierkegaard who said that he'd rather be dead than bored. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. I got his book actually right next to me. I'm going to be reading it later tonight. So, unreality such as pornography. I think we've kind of been distracting ourselves with pornography since the beginning. That's not going to stop. So, and distraction leads to indifference, insensitivity, and soullessness. The distraction does not lead to the indifference. I'd say the indifference leads to the distractions. You feel indifferent. In order to feel something, you look for a distraction. If you're insensitive, you look at things that would simulate heightened sensitivity. And soullessness soullessness has no place in the whole thing, because God isn't a thing. For that, for this, there really isn't. Soullessness actually, I'm not sure how you'd make less of a soul by being distracted. I don't know if that's, is that a teaching in Catholicism, that the more distracted you are, the less of a soul you have? Because that's kind of messed up, if it is. I would definitely argue the opposite way, that indifference leads to the necessities of distraction. So, finally, what are the final two stages, the end game of the new doctrine of resurrection, the new spirituality of post-dignitatem humanum. I can't pronounce that. Both are intrinsically tied together. They may be dubbed moonshot ideas, but such false modesty defies the intense ambition of their visionaries to realize them. It's not a modesty to call it a moonshot idea at all. I don't know why that would... Okay, and the end game of the new doctrine of resurrection, it wouldn't be a resurrection, because if you didn't die, so the spirituality would not matter. It would make what you're talking, your religion, to an extent, irrelevant. And you are just so afraid of that concept that you will write pieces like these saying that it is somehow actively attacking, when it's a technology and a science. It doesn't attack, it just does. And the end game, okay, the way he describes this as a conspiracy just blows my mind, because this is some crazy Illuminati bullshit stuff. To me, I guess what might be an unpopular way of looking at that kind of stuff is, I don't believe we as humanity are competent enough to maintain certain conspiracies, and I certainly don't believe we would be competent enough to build a not religion to undermine religion. That would be really take way too much coordination and thought. And not to mention, if that's what's happening, you've already written about it, so you've kind of already exposed it. And Clonal propagation. The chief human motivation for taking advantage of clonal reproduction would undoubtedly be in the quest for some kind of immortality, which plainly has a deep influence in the networked human affairs. Lederberg wrote in Orthobiosis, The Perfection of Man, who controls such power is essentially steering the clear, obvious hazards of who controls such power is essentially the steering clear of the obvious hazards cloning threatens. A well-established totalitarian society might indeed try and assure its own perpetuation by genetic technology as further support to its existing apparatus of thought control, and so clonal propagation would be best left in the trusted hands of the cloud, who have long made their personalities and interests such as biotechnology alone, and the well-respected billionaire CEOs and their cherished tech firms. Okay, again, now you've come to an interesting point again. When you stop bringing, religion into it, this guy, I actually might find a book by Lederberg, because he's way more intelligent than the guy writing this. He's actually bringing up what would be issues. Because yes, if a society gained the upper hand in that and decided to, okay, we're going to perpetrate ourselves forever while you struggle to keep up, we will continue to expand and you will die off over time. And clonal propagation is very... are we talking cloning parts of people or whole people? That's an entirely different type of argument there, but it's still a very good argument to have. So, alright, now let's see if it goes back to crazy on the next. Transconsciousness, until indefinite lifespan is resolved, man must make do with the body he is given. It can only endure so much until it ceases to function. Like any ongoing adventure, I have no idea how it ends, but I know it will. Larry Ellison admitted in May, when he served as the commencement speaker at the University of Southern California. How is that an admission? Because we haven't discovered that yet. Of course we don't know. It's not an admission at all. It's not some shameful secret that, hey, we haven't finished transconsciousness yet. And yes, we know in the human condition that we basically abuse and see how long our body lasts before we die. We are all incredibly aware of this. That's why we're trying to solve the problem. But consider an existence beyond living in a body. Attempts are underway to upload memories to a computer. Transconsciousness involves updating your own awareness, uploading your own awareness, accessible anywhere and anything. Consider an existence both the body and out of body, both transphysical and within normal limitations of the human person. If you are the mood to just be yourself rather than the experience transconsciousness affords, you are in control. Are you resurrection? Whether one's soul is successfully synced with transconsciousness experience is perhaps a relative question, but a perplexing one. Are immortals to be soulless digital numbers, or can the new Adam finally become just like God? Yeah, that is a decent question, actually, yeah. Would, if you believe in spirituality, would the consciousness you have now trapped in wherever be just like God? I still wouldn't say you are resurrection, because resurrection involves coming back from the dead, and if you've already uploaded yourself, you didn't die. You don't resurrect. The consciousness is transferred. So if we're considering that being alive, then no resurrection has occurred because no death has occurred. Honestly, the idea of that, I'm not entirely sure how it would work. Not because I think we are, have some sort of soul or anything like that, just simply because I'm not entirely sure how we would program a machine and how easily corruptible the machine to hack you would be, and how easily we could probably just sell to some people that certain things are there with just a pre-programmed thing of results. You know? Reminds me of that Cowboy Bebop episode where you upload your consciousness, quote-unquote, to a guy who didn't end up existing. Actually, this guy... Somebody find this guy's email and send him that episode of Cowboy Bebop. It's a great episode. So... Perhaps you have noticed there's no mention here of love. No. No, there isn't. At all. Love's an emotion, and if you don't believe it is an outside thing coming from God, why would you mention it? The only kind of love that can exist in these realms is not imago Dei, but imago sui, narcissism. Yet, one again, all this reveals secularism is nothing more than an attempt to remake Christianity's understanding about men. It's not attempting to remake it, it is attempting to kind of replace it for people that don't believe it. We're never going to get you to stop believing, because we can't. But we can come up with theories of our own. And I don't believe that, well, it can be somewhat narcissistic, I will grant you that, but secularism in itself is not a narcissistic thing. Secularism protects you from us as well. I don't think people understand that. Or at least I don't think religious people tend to understand that. God in the world, the lusty promises of immortality promised here are only empty copies of man's real purpose to know, love, and serve God. You believe that is your purpose. Those of us who don't believe in God do not. So it's not empty to us. And it wouldn't be an empty copy of serving God because God wouldn't be there. You can say it's self-serving because it is. Because God isn't a thing. I don't understand why religious people's worldview is so locked in God existing. They can't conceive of why people that don't, that it's not even a concept in their head to entertain, would do actions like this. I mean, it's you are coming from the perspective of that God exists, therefore it's heresy, and so you go, why on earth would anyone do this? Well, if God doesn't exist, all of these possibilities become tenable. That is what you don't understand. And while I will fully admit all of this is in a really ethical gray area, how are we going to ever sort it out if we just throw up our hands and go, well, it's heretical or God doesn't want us to? We will never sort these things out, and those of us that don't believe will be forever stuck waiting and wondering because you say we can't look into it. So, like, we're not involving you. We're trying our best not to involve you. You're involving yourself. Because of the belief that Christ's death blew open the doors of death, man lives in the light of resurrection faith, though not without battles. Eternal life is not, as the modern reader might immediately assume, life after death, in contrast to this present life, which is transient and not eternal. Benedict the 14th wrote in Jesus of Nazareth Part 2, Benedict is speaking about Zoe life. It's because of the belief. You believe it. We don't. that's really all I need to get out of this. It isn't a contrast to the life. We understand that. To you, this is the big test before we go to the eternal life. I get that. You can do that if you like. Those of us that don't think that this is just some test would like to see what we can do with our time unregulated by beliefs that we don't share. So, eternal life is life itself, real life. Again, alluding to the fact that this is all just a test, so it doesn't fucking matter. Which can also be lived in the present age and is no longer challenged by physical death. I get the idea. At this point, to seize life, here and now, real life that can no longer be destroyed by anything or anyone, it is a concept more revolutionary than anything of what abstract philosophy and molecular biology propositions. Oh, fuck, you don't know what revolutionary means, do you? Oh. We don't understand it. We understand the concept. It is a concept, perhaps the only concept, which can seriously challenge the dominance of the new regime. But first the scales must fall. The light of resurrection faith persists. Why? Why are you reiterating this? We understand the concept. It's a very, very, very old concept. Nothing revolutionary at all. In fact, the concept of there not being a God and what to do is actually not as old. And has spawned a lot of ideas that have been considered revolutionary. And if you wanted to say more spectacular or, more anything that was saying that it is somehow a bigger and a higher power thing, I could, at least forgive that. But revolutionary, it is not more revolutionary of what abstract philosophy and molecular biology proposes at all. Also, the whole new regime thing is starting to piss me off. Until that manifesto becomes the song of humanity's revolution for immortality, one more citation about the new regime. Quite simple and obvious things. At first, sterilization of the unfit, liquidation of backwards races, we don't want any deadweights, selective breeding, the real education, including prenatal education, but we'll go on to biochemical conditioning in the end and direct manipulation of the brain. This is stupendous Feverstone. This is Lord Feverstone, also known as Richard Devine, speaking to Mark Studdock. Feverstone is passionately speaking about the strategy of an organization he's associated with called the NICE, the National Institute of Coordinated Experiments. It is a work of fiction from C.S. Lewis, That Hideous Strength. It is also very succinctly and chillingly describes secularism's moonshot of doctrine of resurrection. No, it doesn't. In fact, it's talking about before you were alive with even prenatal. How can you resurrect what was never there? And it's not a doctrine either. There's no doctrine. There is an exploration of possibility. Just looking at I'm going to read it again. Quite simple and obvious things. At first, sterilization of the unfit. No, because then we don't get genetic variances, which we will need. Liquidation of the backwards races. Yeah, that's genocide again. Also, not something we're looking for. Selective breeding, eugenics. We get it. Bad. We don't attempt to do that. We're trying to use other means with biomechanical and biological things that we can add to a existing person. The real education, so you're including prenatal education, suggesting a brainwashing that we are apparently attempting to put on you even before you come out of the womb. But we'll get onto biomechanical conditioning in the end and direct manipulation of the brain. So much headache. Also, you sound even worse when you try and make all of this look like it makes sense. Like, this is where we're headed. If you want to call out that there might be some ethical problems with that direction, by all means. Just realize that saying, well, God doesn't want you to, doesn't mean anything to the rest of us. At all. And then comparing it to, like, Nazi science and eugenics, while it is the things that make us give pause about these things, are things that we are already considering and know. I personally don't want to live forever. That sounds awful. To me, because I live for the absurd little weird moments of life, but I can see where it would appeal to somebody. But I don't judge them because of it. And I think that judging them because of it is fucking stupid. And I just have such a headache from all of this right now. Just fucking get your heads out of your asses and look that we're not including God in these things because it has nothing to do with him. When we try and run parallel or completely off from you, you somehow try and encompass it with God, and I don't understand why. It's like you don't want us to stop including you in these thoughts, even though you complain when we try and come up with things, because then it's heretical. I don't know what you want other than complete and total conversion. In which case, that's not gonna happen, and kinda sounds more totalitarian and authoritarian and fucking, dictatorship-like than anything we have somehow proposed with this. So, before you look at that potential futures that may lead to that in our stuff, how about you look at what you want us to all to do? Because giving up a sense of my own identity that I don't believe, or giving up the possibilities of these things, sounds far, far more restrictive than simply not involving you. Okay? Just fucking deal with it.